Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to BeamNG, and we are going to be continuing with the story of Phompsonby. So, in the last two episodes, we've seen the rise and the golden age in the 20s of Phompsonby, and we're now into the era of the Great Depression, the big sad. We're into the 30s, and I'm actually going to be combining it with the 40s because, well, not a lot particularly happened in terms of car design for Phompsonby during this era because of the Great Depression and their so-called dark age during the 30s, when with the failure of the luxury, Phompsonby didn't do particularly well. They were only kept afloat by their racing team and various government contracts for, just to try and get a bit of money in and some relegate sales of cars. So we're first going to be looking at this, the Family Mark III, and up until now, the Family has been one of the staples of Phompsonby. This is the latest in the line, and unfortunately, the last in the line. So for any of you Family series of vehicle lovers from the last two episodes, this is unfortunately the last in the series, because of the big sad, basically. It is the pinnacle of Phompsonby luxury. Again, very similar to the previous Mark I and Mark II. We have the sort of gold yellow, we've got the black, we've got the red interior and deployable roof, plenty of rear storage, very similar engine sort of style, and it gets to a very similar top speed, about 83 miles an hour. There you go, 84, 83, so very similar, decadent Phompsonby luxury. And, well, unfortunately, that just isn't cutting it. Here we go, if we get ourselves into a driving position, here we go. Unfortunately for Phompsonby, it just wasn't a good time. Had the Great Depression not hit Europe, didn't hit Europe and England quite as much as it did America, however it did still hit. There was still sort of Black Monday, I believe, and various other things. And had Black Monday, stock market crash and everything not happened, perhaps the Family Mark III could have sold very well, Phompsonby could have continued to enjoy success, but unfortunately that just didn't happen. Because of the Great Depression, nobody could afford luxury decadent vehicles such as the Family. The Family Mark III, so it didn't do particularly well. It was pulled from store shelves 2 or 3 years later to, unfortunately, poor sale figures, which resulted in a financial loss. Talking of a financial loss, the next vehicle that they tried to do was replace the Longstar. The Longstar was introduced in 1921 and continued sale all the way through to the stock market crash and the Great Depression, being phased out early 1930, 1931. And the drive style was the attempted replacement, very similar coupe to the Longstar, meant to be the replacement successor, fully hard top, very similar, again, engine style and everything, just a modernised revamp of the Longstar. But unfortunately, once again, poor sales figures due to the fact that nobody had money to buy cars like this. They needed cheap cars, they needed used cars, they needed just cars that didn't cost a lot to run and didn't cost a lot to buy, and could get them from A to B as simply and as cheaply as possible with good reliability. And while this car had some of them, older cars were on the market from other manufacturers, including Phompsonby. Plenty of used Phompsonby cars could have been found outside of the main dealers, which meant that, once again, this didn't do as well as Phompsonby had hoped, and it resulted in, once again, another financial loss for the company. So again, much like the Family Mark III, had things been different, this could have been a particularly good success. Unfortunately, though, the circumstances of the world prevented it from happening, and it only sent the company down to more financial ruin and more towards bankruptcy. And obviously other cars had to be cancelled because of couldn't hire the workers, couldn't afford the parts, couldn't afford the tooling. That meant things like the Enterprise, the Everyman, especially the Limousine, the Wagoneer, they all had to go. And the only thing that kept them afloat was the Phoenix, the new race car that replaced the Green Arrow, debuted at the same time as the Green Arrow. Sounds particularly menacing. And well, it was just the replacement for the Green Arrow. Carried them all the way through the 1930s racing seasons. Did better than the Green Arrow, I'm going to say, because it most probably did in order to keep the company going. But once again, very similar old-style bank track racing car. I've tried to do some interesting styling here because, well, using the automation freeform blocks, various bits and pieces. So if we can get it onto the bank here, and there's bonnet view. There you go, driver view. There you go. It's a bit quieter due to probably BeamNG's noise cancellation, but there you go, 150-ish miles an hour at, you know, max revs, engine screaming, car's dying. Oh, we're definitely dying. Yep. There we go. But yeah, that is the replacement for the Green Arrow, and I've just completely wrecked it. But the racing team really was the hero of Phompsonby in this era, because beyond various random government contracts or handouts, for the most part, Phompsonby didn't do particularly well in terms of selling cars. So this was really what had to carry them through. But then we get to 1939. 1939, war breaks out. Phompsonby sees this as an opportunity, perhaps, to secure some more government contract and government funding to produce military vehicles, because the government was always looking for new designs, and they kept on throwing out design competitions and various other incentives. And if you've seen some of my Sprocket videos, you'll have known that Phompsonby did try to produce some designs, and some designs did get produced and did get sent various places and trialled. However, none of their military vehicles were particularly successful in terms of armoured cars and tanks. This, however, was a cheap car for the RAF. It is a simple utility van, as you can see in the RAF colour scheme. You have the various RAF badging, roundel, the weight limit there, numbering, letterings, and it is a utility van to be used on RAF airfields. And it was produced in a high quantity. It was particularly of use and success. Little inline 3 engine, very simple to produce, very quick to produce, very cheap to produce in terms of materials and time. The van doesn't go particularly fast. It doesn't particularly need to. Plenty of rear storage, canvas top which could be removed to secure access to the bits in the back if you didn't want to open the rear door. Obviously just simply stitched, pinned on there. We have, of course, got blackout lights on there, and it is a very little utility van, very rugged, very durable, and something that was of particular interest to the RAF, and it was produced in its thousands. Various airfields across the UK used them during the Battle of Britain, late Battle of Britain, and they were used across other Commonwealth nations as far as, you know, Asia into France. Sploosh. Yep, we're not escaping that. But yeah, it was used for a long while, into the 50s, in fact. Is how long this thing continued to serve, because it was just a hardy little utility vehicle. You could ship them in relative bulk quantities. It has some off-roading suspension, off-roading tyres to be used at temporary airfields or airfields in places such as the desert. As you can see, here we go up the sand, nice and easy. We'll see how high we can go there, if we can actually reach up the top. Very useful. Oh, hey, and over the top. So yeah, easily used in sandy and muddy conditions. It was the main money bringer during wartime, beyond government contracts and retooling factories to produce war goods, such as aircraft parts, tank parts, other various vehicle parts, because, you know, Phompsonby has these factories, might as well use them, and that meant retooling them to be used for the war effort. and that's really what got Phompsonby through the wartime period, through to the mid to late 40s. And mid to late 40s brought hope, rebuild, and Phompsonby produced the Dart, which, as you can see, is a very slick-looking sports car, which probably wasn't the best of ideas at the time. You know, war-torn Britain society, nobody can afford this, nobody has money, everyone's living off coupons. Petrol's rationed, materials are rationed, food is rationed, clothes are rationed. Nobody has money. And so producing something like this, you know, could have well have been a sort of we're back statement. Alternatively, it could have actually been an attempt to produce some sort of vehicle that people would want. But there you go, automatic gearbox, or arcade gearbox I should say. Struggled with it. But yeah, it could well have been a statement of, you know, look at us, we're back. The war hasn't finished us off, neither did the Great Depression, we're back. It could have been a concept car. It did get sold, or attempted to at least, yeah, without success, and for good reason. As I previously listed, everything is Russian, nobody has money, everyone's trying to rebuild their houses. Something like 1 in 5, 1 in 3 houses, maybe even 1 in 7 houses in London had been damaged or destroyed by German air raids, after all. So, you know, nobody has anywhere to live, much less park a fancy sports car, so it didn't do particularly well. It's very loud, very brash, very sleek, and yeah, very, very few people could have possibly afforded this. So it didn't do particularly well, did the Dart. And one other vehicle that they tried to push out in the 40s was the Transporter, which is a replacement for the commercial, you know, rear-back van, pickup truck type vehicle. Relatively cheap, sold in various small to mid numbers, probably just about broke even in terms of cost to sold ratio. But once again, nobody can really afford vehicles at this time. So, you know, it sold. It definitely did sell. It's not particularly too fast. It gets to 100-ish miles an hour. Oh, and we cleared that completely. But yeah, cost cutting was a major part of this. Pretty much getting something for businesses, because there was a lot of business to be done in terms of, you know, particularly rebuilding after the war. So that was the attempt at this thing, and it kind of did alright, but not to the degree that they had hoped for. It remained on sale for a little bit, longer than expected, maybe to the end of the decade, at which point it was cancelled, and Phompsonby went quiet, pretty much. Yeah, Phompsonby went quiet. Following the war, and following the 2 decades of turmoil that the company had experienced, racing season wasn't particularly going, so the racing didn't have anything to do for the racing division. Cars weren't selling, couldn't really do much there. Retooling factories had cost them a lot, but that had been subsequently bailed by the government, so they had actually had some money in terms of government funding, especially in terms of contracting. The utility van was the main thing that really pulled them through, but it meant that Phompsonby had to pull back and reassess the situation. They had to really pull back, look at the company, look at the nation and the consumer base, and decide how they would progress, because Phompsonby had previously been living a life of luxury, especially if you look at the family lineage of vehicles. And it meant that they were used to producing and selling high profile, expensive, decadent vehicles that were perhaps above average compared to other there you go, we'll spawn new, we'll get all 3 of them out. So yeah, they were perhaps more decadent and luxury compared to other vehicle manufacturers, and you know, they could sell because people had customer loyalty, people had the money to spend on it. However, that was not always going to work anymore. And here's the 3 vehicles, as you can see. So, the family was obviously their main selling point, and with the loss of the family in the 30s, as well as various other staples, it meant that Phompsonby didn't really know where to go. Which meant that they had to take some time to refigure the company, understand what they were going to do. Were they going to keep on producing cars? Were they going to keep on selling cars? Were they going to completely leave the car selling market? And were they going to just move into producing various quality goods? Continue with the retooling? Were they going to go into aircraft, perhaps? Because some factories did produce parts for Spitfires, Hurricanes, Lancasters, Blenheims, Mosquitoes, all of those things. And yeah, what were they going to do next? And it took several years before any news came out of Phompsonby. It was very much radio silence until the 50s. And we're going to look at the, essentially rebirth of the company in the 50s in the next episode, which will see a complete shift away and redesign from the cars of the 20s, 30s and 40s in terms of looks, obviously. So yeah, I will leave you with this shot of, these shots I should say, of the old family line. So I will thank you all for watching, and goodbye.